Hello everyone and welcome to the AVPN Virtual Conference 2020, the largest convening of social investors in Asia. I'm Natasha from AVPN and the MC for this session. We will be starting the session on utilizing the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit in a few minutes. While we wait for the session to begin, please make sure that you are using the app version of Adobe Connect and not the browser to allow for a better experience. If you have not downloaded the app yet, you can find the download links in the links sharing pod of your screen. To ensure that you're able to listen well and the audio is set up correctly, make sure you run the audio setup wizard. You can find this by clicking Meeting at the top left-hand corner and find the Audio Setup Wizard button. Please ensure that you have good internet connectivity by checking the bars at the top right corner. If at any point you get disconnected or have a bad internet connection, try logging out of the app, and if the issue still persists, you can also join us through Zoom. The link is found on the links sharing pod. If you have any other tech issues, please click on the Tech Help Desk link that you can find in the links sharing pod as well. In the meantime, please let us know what type of organization you are representing in the poll that you see on screen. You can also introduce yourself in the community chat and say hi to the other participants in the room. Thank you for joining us again, and we will begin shortly. Hello everyone, welcome to the session titled Utilizing the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit. I am Natasha, the MC for this session, and thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are not familiar with AVPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourself opportunities to connect, learn, and lead. We are also sharing highlights of our day live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, so don't forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtag AVPN2020. In this session, we are bringing the perspectives of the funders and resource providers on the need to address gaps between investors and investees. We will also look at how the toolkit has been used along their different journeys and also highlight opportunities to define what a common language framework around investment readiness might look like. A few housekeeping announcements before moving to the program. If you're facing any technical challenges, such as difficulties in hearing the speakers, you can click on the Tech Help Desk. I would also like to highlight a few features in this room to keep our conversations lively. To start, please make sure you're using the app version of Adobe Connect and not the browser version. You can find the download links in the links sharing pod. If at any point you get disconnected or have a bad connection, try to log out of the app and then log back in. If the problem still persists, you can join us through the Zoom link on the link sharing pod. Please note that the session will be recorded and you'll be able to access the recording on the website within 24 hours. If you have any questions for the speakers, we will be holding a 10-minute Q&A session at the end, so do stay with us till then. However, you can start typing your questions in the Q&A pod, and we will convey these questions to our speakers. Throughout the session, there will be interactive activities for you to participate in, and we do encourage you to take part in those. Finally, to continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates in this session, please make full use of the AVPN connector through the links sharing pod. And now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Savinda Ranatunga. Savi is engaged in the startup and youth development sector in Asia Pacific for over 12 years through his engagement with ISEC and UNDP, where he currently holds the position of Regional Youth Project Coordinator of UNDP Asia Pacific. Welcome, Savi. The mic is yours.
Thank you so much. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you joining from all around the world for this session in the AVPN Virtual Conference 2020. First of all, I'm really delighted to be your moderator, but also heartfelt gratitude to AVP and team for giving this opportunity to raise awareness, have discussions about these amazing topics. Especially as Natasha mentioned about this session, we are trying to address some of about the social enterprise development toolkit, how in terms of the users, in terms of investees, and also investors can have a common narrative. And the most important thing is of the first step is understanding the context that we have now. So in terms of that opportunity, we'll have a discussion about how various organizations in terms of resource providers and investors are utilizing this platform, and also some of the challenges and also some of the ideas how we can work collectively to improve this investment in readiness for social purpose organizations, social enterprises. I have three amazing speakers lined up for you guys with Jesse, Andy, and Leon. But before that, I just want to give you a little bit of introduction of the work that we do under the UNDP Asia Pacific. So just to go in a little bit into the work that we do, the work that I'm passionately doing. So as you can see at the beginning of the slide on the 700 million youth-led solution. So we are a joint initiative led by UNDP and City Foundation in terms of supporting the massive youth buzz in this region in terms of creating the social entrepreneurship movement. So that's what Youth Collab is all about. But we try to envision it as a movement rather than a project or a program led by young people to support young people to create and social innovations enterprises to address the SDG challenges in our communities. So that's why we really believe that social enterprise toolkits and support is very essential to the core of the work that we do in terms of advancing the SDGs. So in a nutshell, the work that we do is three pronged, supporting enterprises directly, providing them resources, capacities, knowledge, also working with a network of partners. I think that's why the power of network, so the AVPN conference and the platform is really essential to connect with all of you in terms of collectively addressing some of the challenges and advancing this agenda, but also working with governments and policymakers to address some of their challenges, but also strengthen and capacitate them to make sure that we are creating a fostering ecosystem. So I think one of the novel ideas, I think, which actually the toolkit is also helping us, but one of our value additions is to connect the private sector with the young entrepreneurs through helping them to reduce their failure rates. I think the data says more than 90% of the startups are generally having challenges in their first couple of years of social entrepreneurship. And with the COVID-19 impact, we also did a recent survey which also highlights that almost 9 out of 10 young entrepreneurs are having similar challenges of sustaining their startup. I think many other data is coming now as well. So I think that's an important avenue that we can work collectively. I think especially going into social enterprise development toolkit, I think we have many great presenters showing you some of the areas. I think for us, I think it helps us in three ways. Number one is, of course, we as a resource provider to really understand some of the needs that social enterprises are having. I think that's one of the fundamentals of the framework, but also see categorization when we support over 600 social entrepreneurs who are early stage at this journey. It's really helpful to understand their current context and see clustering them based on the needs and necessities that they have. So we can tailor-make our limited resources as resource providers and as investors for the maximum impact. And also it gives us a really good data and visualizations in terms of where we can actually maximize our opportunities and also co-create new programs. I think that has really helped us, I think, to support the network with other partners like incubators, accelerators, and investors networks to connect our startups from their existing platform to understand the context and then really connect them to the next stage of their development path. I think the best experiments are who are already in the AVP and DealShare platform. I invite all of you to pay a visit. It's an amazing collection of over 300 plus social purpose organizations creating immense impact in this region. So we are fortunate to have few of our social enterprises being advocated over there as well, who are actually creating amazing impact, who are using this toolkit to advocate for the impact that they are creating and also understand to improve their investment readiness in their journey. So this is just a little bit teaser about what to come today. With that, I would like to hear from you in terms of some of the ideas that you guys have and the challenges, opportunities as well. So with that, I would like to move to our poll. In terms, now I'm pretty sure you can see the poll. So there are a couple of questions, one multiple choice, one a quick answer. In terms of which of the areas of the social enterprise development toolkit is most important to you from your particular organization. I saw at the entrance survey there were a lot of foundations and trust funds were here as well, or government partners. So what is the toolkit most important to you? And there's also another question on in which area do you find the most challenges, discrepancies between social enterprises and funders in investment readiness. So I think in terms of that's a very critical question that we are trying to address today. I mean, it's a question that we always try to address as well, but hopefully that you're getting some ideas within today. So I can see already some really interest. I think almost half of you are saying that sound business model and clear financial projection is a very important aspect of the toolkit. And also seeing a lot of ideas in terms of investment, impact, increasing sustainability, scalability. I think definitely, I think all of you guys are correct as well. I'll give maybe one more minute for you to fill some ideas. I think this will really help our speakers to address to some of your needs, your challenges and discrepancies as well. I think a lot focus on the financial sustainability side. I think it is no-brainer with the COVID-19 impact. All of us are having various kinds of challenges, but also new areas of programming. I think today morning you had amazing sessions on SDGs impact and also how the private sector is working on COVID. I think resilience was an amazing idea that was being highlighted as well. So I think, yeah, I think we get a nutshell about all these areas that are coming through, especially on the scalability and financial impact. So I think this is a great precursor to moving into our speakers. So let me invite our first speaker to provide her remarks. So our first speaker is Jessie Coates. Jessie is the EY Global Impact Entrepreneur Leader. During recent years, she has been focusing on supporting impact entrepreneurs to achieve SDGs, overcoming barriers to growth, primarily in emerging market countries. She also serves on the board of several local and international impact enterprises and non-profits. I think she can share amazing insights from all her experiences with all of you. So Jessie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Savi, and hi everybody. It's wonderful to connect with you all while I have my early morning coffee here in London. And firstly, I'd just like to thank Savi and the whole AVPN team for inviting me to join this discussion around the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit. As Savi shared, my name is Jessie Coates, and I lead EY's work globally to support impact entrepreneurs. As a quick introduction to EY, I'm sure many of you may be aware of us, but we are a global leader in professional services, including assurance, tax, transactions, and advisory services, and our purpose is to build a better working world. We have over 300,000 employees globally and offices in over 150 countries, and we typically serve the world's largest businesses, governments, and institutions to build trust and confidence in the capital markets. EY Ripples brings together that global EY network in an effort to achieve one shared vision to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people by 2030. And our intent is to engage all of our people in not-for-profit activities to achieve that bold vision by focusing on the areas where EY can best leverage its core capabilities to create impact at scale. So EY Ripples has 3 distinct focus areas where we believe our global knowledge, skills, and experience can make the biggest difference. The first is supporting the next generation workforce, so supporting young people and underserved communities to enter or re-enter the workforce. The second is accelerating environmental sustainability. And the third, which is the area that I lead, is working with impact entrepreneurs, so helping to scale small and growing businesses that are purposefully driving progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we really believe that those incredible businesses are at the heart of how we can achieve a better working world, one where everyone can contribute to and share in the benefits of sustainable, inclusive growth. And so we support social enterprises globally through a portfolio of different solutions targeted at different stages of growth, including from long-term capacity building services to skills development and coaching to digital tools and resources. And just seeing some of your comments come in response to the polls and the quick answer questions earlier, we actually typically focus on two areas really primarily, I would say. The first is when working with earlier stage businesses to really help them refine their business models, develop strong and robust business plans with robust financial projections. And then as businesses move towards the growth stage, we typically really help them to professionalize their systems and processes as they move perhaps from having systems and processes within people's heads to actually having standard operating procedures and mature processes that can really give them the foundations that they need to scale. So hopefully very relevant, just seeing that the responses come in to the polls. And perhaps just to give a few examples of our work, EY collaborates with leading impact investors and entrepreneurship networks to provide a variety of skills development and coaching programs for social enterprises. And these typically feature a combination of practical training, peer discussion, and individual or group coaching, and can range from half-day in-person or virtual workshops to recurring monthly coaching sessions. Digital tools and resources such as EY Velocity and EY Finance Navigator are self-service tools for impact enterprises. And as an example, the EY Finance Navigator is an online financial planning software which enables startups to build financial plans and make and then export their financial projections through a simple, intuitive tool. EY teams also work full-time with social enterprises over the course of several weeks or even several months to help them improve their business resilience, productivity, and capacity to scale sustainably. And over the course of the last few years, we've delivered over 500 projects one-to-one with social enterprises in over 40 countries. And finally, we also translate the lessons learned from working one-on-one with individual impact enterprises into insights that we hope can really accelerate the growth of entire sectors. So, for example, we recently published a report with the Syngenta Foundation entitled "Can Digital Innovation End Hunger?", which reviews new business models for agriculture that could transform food security. So given that many of the programs that we run with impact entrepreneurs are often delivered in collaboration with donors and impact investors, we have a somewhat privileged position of having visibility across both sides of the table, from both the investor perspective and the entrepreneur perspective. And so while I'm neither an investor nor an entrepreneur, so I'm not going to claim to be an expert. I thought I'd share maybe 3 observations from my perspective on some of the challenges that can occur between entrepreneurs and investors. The first relates to the type of financing that entrepreneurs are going after, because I do see a surprising amount of businesses going after really the wrong kind of money. So I would encourage entrepreneurs to really first consider what their financing needs are, and not just how much money they need and for how long, but also really what they intend to use that money for. Is it to fund research, innovation, to purchase a new asset, to invest in the team for long-term growth, or is it for business continuity purposes? And so I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to be clear on that themselves before actually moving towards engaging with investors. And I'd also encourage the investors at this event to really consider whether they are offering the right kind of money to entrepreneurs to achieve their impact goals as well. The second challenge I thought I'd share relates really to the due diligence process and how slow and stressful this can often be for all parties. And it is really important, clearly, to manage expectations from the outset and be very transparent on what the process is, what the timelines are and what is really required of each party, so that you can hold each other to account. And note I say kind of hold each other to account, because I speak to quite a few investors who find that entrepreneurs perhaps can be slow to respond or provide the required level of information, but I do speak to even more entrepreneurs who actually find that sometimes investors themselves don't follow through on the timelines proposed, or perhaps even often request the same documentation several times. So I'd encourage investors to really think about how they can make the investment process as transparent as possible for entrepreneurs, and really think about it from the entrepreneur perspective, because the reality is that I think we all want the social entrepreneurs that we work with to really be focusing their time and effort on creating impact, and not on raising money. And my final observation is really around this term investment readiness, and how that phrase means different things to entrepreneurs and investors. And of course it also means different things to different investors, depending on their focus. So the easiest way for an entrepreneur to understand whether they are investment ready is to be very clear from the outset on what your investment criteria is. And I think there's both an onus on the entrepreneur to ask that question and do that research, but there's also really an onus on the investor or donor again to really be honest and direct on that themselves. And I have personally sat in quite a few conversations between investors and entrepreneurs where there's I'd say a dance that's clearly going on, where one party clearly has something they want to say, or a question they want to ask, which is clearly important, but where maybe they're too afraid to just be direct. So if you find yourself in that situation, I'd encourage both investors and entrepreneurs to just say it, and you'll save a whole lot of time. And equally, this is of course one of the areas where we see that the social enterprise development toolkit, I think, can be an incredibly valuable tool for giving entrepreneurs a really good sense check around typically what most investors are looking for. So I thought I'd share also a few practical applications of how we have been using the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit at EY. And obviously, as an advisory firm, we develop many of our own tools and services for impact entrepreneurs. But actually, we find that the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit has been a really complementary tool for our portfolio. And so just to give a few examples, the first relates to an upcoming business clinic that actually EY is delivering in collaboration with AVPN. And we're delivering that virtually to around 150 social impact enterprises in AVPN's deal share network to help them prepare for investment. So we'll be focusing on topics like company valuation methodologies and developing robust business and financial plans. And at EY, we've developed a suite of training modules on those topics. But of course, for the session to be really valuable, we really want to understand the specific needs of that group that we'll be serving, and really meet them where they are. And so we've actually used the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit to do that. We've asked all of the participating enterprises to complete and assess themselves using the toolkit. And we found that actually there's a number of benefits to that. I mean, an obvious one is that it means that we have a much greater understanding and visibility of who's in the room and their level of maturity, which is enabling us to really tailor that content that we're delivering in that clinic to really support the enterprises where they need it most. But it's also very helpful because it means that the enterprises that are coming to that session actually have a really good understanding of where their own strengths and weaknesses are, so that they can get the most out of it as well. And then the second application relates to actually one of the existing EY tools that we've developed, which is called EY Velocity. So EY Velocity is a freely accessible platform which enables growth stage entrepreneurs around the world to assess themselves against our established framework called the EY 7 Drivers of Growth, to understand the drivers of growth for their businesses and unlock resources to support them on that journey. And so as it sounds, that tool that we've developed has been designed and is typically used most effectively with growth stage businesses. And so I see that the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit as a very complementary tool, because it's typically designed, I would say, and it's not exclusively designed for, but typically designed for slightly earlier stage businesses as they obviously look to access that growth financing. And so we can use that toolkit precursor and a tool that can be used initially before the enterprises can then move on to our EY Velocity platform as they scale. So I think my time is just about up, and I hope that you found some of that information practical and useful, and I look forward to connecting again in the Q&A, and I'll pass back to Savi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I think it's really essential areas that you have mentioned in terms of how the support actually need to be tailored into the challenges. I think the type of financing in terms of the ask and also supply, I think is a very key challenge, and also on the due diligence. I think we have personal experience, especially working with early stage who has great potential. I think it's a very important area that we need to address as well. So a lot of great thoughts. I think a lot of questions coming as well, but we'll move into our next interesting presentation as well from Leon. So Leon To is currently the Executive Director of Damson Capital, an impact investment firm in Singapore. Leon is also the co-founder of Eden and Ellie, a Singaporean social enterprise jewelry company supporting autistic adults. He's very much engaged in the social enterprise development in Asia. So he has personal experiences, but also supporting this ecosystem and also in the investment side from the Damson Capital. So I think that's a great source that Leon can share with all of you. So over to you, Leon. Leon, we cannot hear you yet. Maybe you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I hope that works. Okay, thanks so much for that presentation, Jessie. I wanted to just quickly say I think you were just sending out some notes for impact investors, so I'm taking note. We'll definitely see how we can keep the timelines as impact investors when we are doing due diligence. But maybe I think I was hoping to add a perspective today on impact investing and perhaps demystify a little bit of that process of what we go through in the conversations between investors and entrepreneurs, and in the midst of all that, be able to give you a perspective of why sometimes it does take a little bit longer. Let me just start by saying, hi everyone, I'm Leon To. I'm the Executive Director of Damson Capital. Really excited to be here. I hope everyone amidst this COVID-19 situation is keeping safe, healthy, and well at home. But let me just first start by also acknowledging AVP and UNDP today for being able to put together such an amazing virtual conference that will help ensure that we continue to highlight social issues and support our change makers, such as all of you who are on this call attending the conference. So it's a real special thank you to all of them who put this together. I think in terms of just jumping in, the challenge of investment readiness is multifold. So, as we dive into it, let me just walk you through some of those different perspectives. So Damson Capital, we are a impact investment unit. We do have two aspects to our company. And really for us, it's about catalyzing the growth of social enterprises who are creating business solutions to improve the quality of life of people and protect our environment here in Asia. So we do have an investment arm, and we do have an advisory arm helping other investors with due diligence, as well as understanding, business models of social enterprises, which could be quite unique to just general businesses, startups out there. Our implicit philosophy is that, if social enterprises thought only like a nonprofit or a charity or a government or a pure kind of for-profit entity, that it would not be able to move the needle for a lot of people and for the community and for the environment. And hence, that's why social enterprises stand alone as a pillar, as business solutions that could really challenge the norm today in how we create sustainable solutions for people. So jumping in, a couple of things when we talk about investment readiness, and similar to what Jesse was talking about, I wanted to just quickly also acknowledge that, for us at Damson Capital, we're early to growth stage investors, and so as high potential, we look for high potential, impact and strong or clear financial outcomes. And these are all enterprises that we focus on here in Asia to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we focus on three core themes, essentially, on how do we increase access to basic needs and services, as well as sustainability, sustainable livelihoods around the environment. And the last of all is how do we create resilient communities, especially changing, issues on individuals with special needs, mental health, resilient communities with atypical, neurotypical individuals, and how do we support them. But we cover a range of different industries. So what I'll be talking about today is very much all public sources. You can go online and find all of this, but I hope it walks you through a little bit of the thinking that I'm going through as we as investors are looking through an enterprise on the ground. So to start with, we look at, knowing by investors. So some was mentioning before, who offers what really depends. And so us as Damson Capital, we have, we look into certain prototype and post-revenue and growth startup stage social enterprises. There are a lot of people who are early stage nonprofit, mature nonprofit, or even idea stage social enterprise seed investors. So it really depends who you are looking out for. And the spectrum of capital, which ABPN and a couple of partners have spent a good amount of time studying, is a really good resource to start with. Right? So if you are a seed stage company, go look out for these seed stage investors, because it's going to be the mandate that they're looking for. Sometimes there are lots of great conversations that happen, and we pause at the end and say, well, but we're not at the right stage for you, or you're not the right stage for us. And so there is that disconnect sometimes. So for the entrepreneur takeaway, additional things you should be looking at is, know who you're speaking with, and know that some investors are just not fit for you, right? So it's okay. You can't be a fit for everyone. And each stage has its own type of investors. And so look at what ABPN has done with the continuum of capital. Really good paper there. The other bit is on what investors are looking for, right? When we say we're impact investors, we're not just here for the business model. We're here really to understand a couple of different things. And what they look for, or investors in general look for, could be cut up in different ways. So for example, one of the criteria is what industry that they're looking at. So for example, in clean energy, they're looking for estimations of energy being created in a sustainable, clean manner, and they're looking for associated metrics and targets and all of that. And naturally, I think some of the questions that are slowly coming up is also related to sales growth, and I think and naturally for that, I think that it will have certain implications of who is actually looking at the work that you're doing as well. So be very, very clear what type of investor, because the investor will also stipulate what type of growth that they're looking for. And last of all is, of course, something very, very common amongst all different companies is the number of beneficiaries, right? So they're looking for different things like, okay, well, sometimes they look at industry, and sometimes they're actually looking at the number of people they're impacting, and some of them are looking for scale, and that's fine, right? But the question is, from the get-go, are you asking these right questions? So for entrepreneurs, really, it's okay. It's okay to pin the investor down and say, tell me what you're looking for. Tell me, do I fit within your mandate? Ask the question, right, to yourself, how am I, as an entrepreneur, creating this type of impact, whether in the social, environmental, and financial perspective? And as an entrepreneur, knowing what your enterprise is doing, how you're measuring it is really critical. And to investors, what other investments have you done before? That's a really good proxy question for entrepreneurs to take away, because that gives you a much better idea for what your investor is looking for. So this is even before a question of investment readiness. But when we go down the route of investment readiness, there's this, we've actually worked really hard. I think Village Capital, ABPN, Credit Suisse, and UNDP, I think have really contributed to this social enterprise development toolkit. And this toolkit is really interesting because it is a structured way within different kind of facets, whether in your business model, your revenue streams, or even the way that you're looking at your business strategy, right? And putting that all together as a fundamental way to identify which stage of growth you're at and what kind of investor that you potentially need as well. So that's what the toolkit does. So if you log on to it again on AVPN's website, you can actually fill it in. It's a questionnaire, fairly simple, and it's very qualitative. So it's not a perfect tool, but I think it's a good starting point to actually allowing you to figure out which areas you're looking at. And naturally with the development toolkit, as you're filling it in, one of the interesting things, which I'll show you in the next slide, is that mismatches often do happen, right? Because there's a question of what the entrepreneur thinks, and there's also a question of what the investor thinks. And as a person who's been on both sides, as an investor and an entrepreneur myself, there are many different times where we differ on where we think we are in the progress. And that's fine, right? But it's a great opportunity for us to sit down and talk about that. So what does a mismatch look like, right? So it looks like a little bit like this. The mismatch is when you're filling in as an entrepreneur and you think, okay, I've done all my homework, this is where I am, and the square black boxes is essentially where the entrepreneur fill in terms of the stage that they're at, right, and of their progress or their maturity of a company. Now let's just look at this. You can't see all the details, but the top is essentially a company that's ready to go IPO or sell itself. And number one, which is right below of this chart, is where the enterprise or the entrepreneur is saying that they're extremely early stage. And in this example, and this is it's a true example that we did with another entrepreneur, right? He actually filled it in on one level, and you can see in our interpretation as an investor, we put it in a yellow box. Now, I don't think it's a bad situation, right? But the assessment helps us have a proper conversation tangibly about what is missing or what you feel is a mismatch or what you feel is just a misalignment as well. So for this example, we found that one, there were similar products in the market which haven't succeeded and they were not viewed as viable, and that the entrepreneur was presenting a product, but in actuality he didn't have or at least we disagreed to a certain extent where his minimum viable product was. He said that he was able to create the product, but nobody of his customer base has used it yet. So we were saying, okay, well, that's interesting, but have they used it, or have you at least tested a few people, right? And the answer was no. And the third is that the team articulated very good projected revenue, business models, customers, but there's very little validation in the market, which he felt was already validated on the basis of the concept and the business model. And the last of all was that it's early stage. It didn't validate a lot of the value proposition because it was not just the product. So I think mismatches do happen. In social enterprise toolkit, it helps when you can match this with the due diligence. One of the biggest challenges for investors is that when we hear a pitch and we actually ask questions, we often get a very different picture when we start diving into a due diligence process. Now, the one thing I want you to take away from this slide isn't so much the colors or all the different facets of due diligence, but the fact is that for an investor who is equipped with people's money, we have a very, very little room for making assumptions. We have to ask for the question. And so the rule of thumb is, if you can think of the question, you probably have to ask the question to the entrepreneur. And I think that that's very, very critical for our role as investors. So sometimes it does feel like a move, and sometimes it does take a bit longer than we expect. But that's one of the reasons why it's been really difficult for us as investors to just very quickly on the basis of a pitch. It's not as easy as that. There are angel investors, seed investors who can do that, but even under those premises, they still have a very specialized due diligence process. So the last thing I want entrepreneurs to hopefully be able to take away is knowing that it can be different from enterprise to enterprise, but more importantly, it's okay to ask investors to set expectations of what it could look like, what the structure and the process is, and most of the time they will have a checklist of information that they need So go out and ask them for that, because it helps set your expectation and gives them the opportunity to share their expectation of you, of themselves, and hopefully, it'll be a smoother process. So this is a little bit about how the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit fits in to our process, and I hope that you all will get an opportunity to have a look at it. So I'm looking forward to your questions. I saw some really good ones already. So thank you again for this opportunity, and look forward to speaking at the Q&A. I'll pass it back to Savi.
Thank you so much, Leon. I think it was really good. I think the example was really highlighting as well how the mismatch is happening between the investors and investees. I think considering the time as well, let me invite the last amazing speaker to add his thoughts as well. Andy Annett is the APAC lead for Unreasonable Group, a US-based group which helps large social enterprises scale even further and faster. He moved to Myanmar 5 years ago and supported the nascent tech startup scene in the country. And he's also an entrepreneur who has founded and subsequently sold his own business, so which has very similarly has his own personal experiences and also from the investor side as well. So without further ado, Andy, over to you. Yeah, we can hear you, Andy. Over to you. Yes, we can hear you.
I'm not sure whether anybody can hear me.
Yes, Andy, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Savi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, Andy, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, sorry about that technical difficulty, and thanks very much to Savi, Jesse, and Leon. As I say, I am Andy Annett. I am actually talking to you from Yangon in Myanmar, where I live, but I represent the Unreasonable Group, and the Unreasonable Group is US and UK based, but working globally. What we do is that we act as a resource or a partner with large corporates generally, and we implement some of those programs. So very much like Jesse was saying at EY, we would partner with companies like EY to deliver these programs that essentially help scale social, high growth social enterprises and social businesses around the world. Our model is based on essentially three areas. The first is innovation. Second is selecting and running programs, which are usually 2 or 3 week residential programs for CEOs of these growth stage companies. Very intensive. We're obviously switching those to digital at the moment, like this conference. But once businesses have been on those programs, they become alumni for life, and we work very closely with them. We have relationship managers in every continent to work with those entrepreneurs and to work with them right through their process. So just to give you a sense of sort of scale on that say overall we have 225 ventures that we look after, active ventures around the world, and we're adding between 50 and 100 to those every year. In Asia Pacific, we work with businesses in 11 countries, right from India, Australia, China, Japan, Singapore, and so on. And just to give you a sense of scale, we do work at the top end of the scale, at the growth stage. So typically, the rounds that we are looking for people, which are Series A, generally Series A, sometimes Series B, are usually between $5 and $20 million US dollars per round. Sometimes it can be smaller than that, sometimes it can be bigger than that, and an awful lot bigger than that. But that's generally the sort of scale of what we do. So like both Jesse and Leon were saying, we have a perspective from both the entrepreneur's point of view, which is who we are helping, and also the funder's point of view, as in that we are dealing a lot with funders. And we also have we have 2 funds ourselves, which we co-invest into our businesses around the world. So what sort of things are we hearing? And remember, for growth businesses, the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit, some of the things are for earlier stage ventures. So at the sort of stage that we're dealing with, people have sorted out their problem and their vision. the value proposition, the market, their product, and those sort of things which are in the toolkit are very useful at that first stage. But I'm just going to highlight again on the areas that the second stage that you can still draw out from that social enterprise toolkit. The first one is scaling, and there is a difference between a scaling plan and a credible scaling plan. And again, at the growth stage, people may be looking beyond their own country. So it's whether you do that, it's how you do that, what sort of arrangements work on that side of things. It's about diversification of products and services. Should they be moving into other areas? Which is another typical area. And again, also with partnerships. Who are those partners? Is partnerships and opportunities to move forward. And again, at the growth stage, you're not looking for imaginary, we will build this and we will hope people will follow. It's about actual consumer traction or business traction that you're getting from this. And we want to see evidence in terms of sales at the way we're going. The other area that may seem straightforward, but is about team. So obviously, everybody says at early stage, it's about the team and we invest in the entrepreneurs and so on. All of that is true, but at growth stage, you're often looking beyond that team. You're looking to the next tier of management. You're looking at key appointments in sales and international developments. You might be looking at the board. You might be looking at an advisory board. So team is still a very relevant thing to look at and to go through the toolkit. But think about these sort of potentially slightly more mature offers there. As both Leon and Jesse have said, funding structures and valuation is really, really key. Not just what type of finance you're going for, but what is the structure of that. And the key is the valuation. And actually, there's all sorts of different experiences on this, and that is obviously the headline figure in a lot of cases. But it's a complex discussion. It's one that is still a grey and a slightly flexible area, and is probably, the top conversation that is had at the early stage before you get past these activities. And so those are all things that can be accessed through the development toolkit. I think the other thing that the toolkit does is provide this very, very essential next stage about access and connections. And the connections are, obviously at the back end of the toolkit, you've got a whole load of AVPN members that you can access through. The way that we work at Unreasonable is it's all about peers, it's all about connections. So we build a very, very strong network around the world of entrepreneurs that are at different stages in similar businesses that can talk one-on-one to each other. We also get them to recommend partners, we get them to recommend investors, and we have our own internal sort of investor measurement system and things as well. So think of the toolkit not as just a tool, but as a stepping stone onto that very valuable area of connections. And just finally, I'd just also like to say a little bit from the funders' perspective. Again, what these enterprises are asking funders for is more clarity. It's a stressful period at any sex. At any stage, and the quicker that decisions can be made, the better, and the clearer funders are in terms of what they're looking for right at the beginning, makes the world a happier place. So more clarity earlier, everything from websites to initial conversations. The world of definitions, as AVPN as anywhere else, we're working a lot of acronyms. But again, when is an agriculture business that is funding farmers? Is that a fintech business? Is that an agriculture business? Is there, what are tech businesses? Is everything a tech business or nothing a tech business is? So again, part of that clarity is around definitions and how closely investment theses are based on SDGs or anything else. So again, be very, very clear on those definitions. To reiterate what both Leon and Jesse have said, better DD, clearer DD, faster DD, and DD that's relevant to the scale and the size of the businesses that are working on. I've been on some interesting calls over the last 2 or 3 months, and I think that there's some very positive moves in that sense, in that due diligence is going to be, I think, quicker, easier, slicker. You don't need people sitting in your offices for weeks and weeks at a time to do this. So I think there's some hopeful things on that. And finally, for every entrepreneur, it's all about timing. It's all about speed. And again, the worst things are ones that go on for months and months at a time. Even if they're successful, you know, and a sensitivity to speed and timing is a key thing. So overall, my hypothesis here is that the Social Development Toolkit is a great piece of work. It's a really good tool, and it can also be used very much for growth stage businesses. So back to Savi.
Thank you so much. I think you raised really interesting points. I think all three of you, I think there have a lot of interest and on some of the thematic areas. I think we got a lot of questions. They are getting answered right now. I think you might see now since we are moving into the question and answer round as well. And then specifically on and also Leon on highlighting the interest on like having the conversation between the investors and the investees. I think not the one way around from investors to investees, but the other way around as well. We received a couple of questions as well, how important to have that dialogue. So with that, I will move into some of the questions, which is also connecting some of the general questions that came from our channel, but also in terms of the interest from the basic areas that our speakers have been sharing. So maybe speakers can give us a couple of highlights from their thoughts as well, given that considering the time as well. So moving into Jesse, I think you will share really good interest because you mentioned that you're not an investor, but also not an investee as a social entrepreneur, but especially on the private sector. I think they play a very important role in this ecosystem. So what are the areas the private sector can support to improve the investment readiness of social enterprise organization? Yeah, over to you, Jesse.
Sure. Thanks, Savi. So it's a really interesting question, and I guess I have a few perspectives. The first is that I think for private sector organizations, for me, what's quite important when supporting social enterprises is to really think about what your core capability is, and how as a mature private sector organization, you can really extend that core capability to support social enterprises. And so if you're a financing company, how can you extend your financing and mobilize your capital to really support smaller, earlier stage, impact-driven organizations? If you're a manufacturing or a distribution company, how can you extend your supply chain to incorporate more perhaps kind of earlier stage, more diverse, more inclusive, more sustainable businesses into your supply chain? For a professional services firm like EY, you know, we've been thinking hard about how we can extend more of the services that we would typically provide to larger businesses to earlier stage, more socially or environmentally motivated businesses. So I think that's one piece, really thinking about how you can leverage your core capability. And the reason that I say that is because doing what you do best is always going to create the most impact ultimately and help social enterprises the most. The second point I'd make is one around collaboration, because I think as we all know, all of the delegates attending this session, the reality is that social purpose organizations, social enterprises, they need a whole suite of support to help them get investment ready. They need finance, they need business support, they need networks, they need talent. There's a whole suite of things. And so the reality is one private sector organization is never going to be able to provide everything. And so collaboration with others is really important, and collaboration across private sector organizations, but also public-private sector collaborations, collaborations with nonprofits as well. And just to give one example, EY collaborates very closely with Unilever and also with the UK's Department for International Development in a public-private partnership that's called Transform. And Transform is a £40 million fund that invests, provides grant financing and business support to social enterprises in Africa and South Asia that provide life-enhancing products and services to low-income communities. And what we find there is that by coming together with Unilever and with DFID, we're able to really achieve more and provide more support to help businesses become investment ready than we could do alone. And I think that just as I kind of close on this question, the one final point I'd really make is that I don't think we should think about this as a one-way exchange of how the private sector can support social purpose organizations. I think we really need to think about this as a two-way value exchange, because what I see in many of EY's kind of large multinational clients and EY ourselves is that many of those large private sector organizations are really on a journey around thinking about how they can shift from perhaps a shareholder value model to more of a stakeholder value model, and thinking about how they can incorporate more sustainable, inclusive systems and practices into their business. And really, I see social enterprises really role modeling that every day. And so actually, there's a huge amount to learn. So I think it's important to think about it as that kind of two-way value exchange in that relationship.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I think, yes, contributing, also learning as well, and public-private partnership, I think that's something that we as United Nations is very much advocating to achieve the SDG agenda as well. But you really raised a good point on the power of networks and the collaboration. So moving to a question that came also from one of the interests and also to Leon's side. So how important it seems there are a lot of investors and potential donor side in the community as well, in terms of using this toolkit also as an opportunity to share and network and learn as investor community to supporting the investment readiness of social purpose organizations. So what are some of your thoughts, Leon?
Oh, wow, Savi, jump into the hardest question of them all already. Okay, so I think when it comes down to using the toolkit, the toolkit actually allows, I think as an entrepreneur, the one thing that it gives me is a frame of reference in what areas most investors would be looking for. And I think that's been one of the most beautiful parts of having the development toolkit. Everything from your business model to your HR policy, like the team that you have, to even the revenue streams, what kind of growth projections you have, and how that looks within the framework itself. There are certain key references in the development toolkit. For example, what kind of growth you're expecting, how fast are you growing. So I think these different aspects are really important to it. But I think the other aspect on the investor side, I think it also frames the investors' thinking. When they are just doing a kind of back of the napkin review of a company, a lot of investors develop a certain confidence level around the idea of how we can get whether you fit our mandate very, very quickly. And it's very tough to just understand that from the basis of one conversation, two conversations. And I think it helps pull us back to think very independently and critically about the enterprise when we have these different buckets. And one example that I would talk about is in agriculture. So Jessie, you talked about one of the stories about dancing around. We call it the dancing around the coconut tree. And one of the challenges of that is really about trying to give the investor the right perspective. So, for example, the reason why I talk about measurements from industry and measurements from beneficiaries is sometimes we go in saying that, okay, this company is an agriculture company, and there are other ones out there who have 10,000 people, and yours has 100 people, right? Is it fair to compare it? Well, sometimes it's not. And there are different ways you can communicate it. So, for example, what we advocate a lot of entrepreneurs to think about is not just the question of the breadth of impact, but also the depth of impact. Are you ensuring that those 100 people are walking away not just with more income, but with also more income and the ability to use the extra income to send the kids to school? So that becomes a very, very powerful tool for us to not only craft the story, but also hit home with the investor what are the important aspects of your business. And the last of all is on the basis of, especially with social enterprises, with new business models, it's very difficult for us to just say, look, we're going to be like Uber, we're going to be like somebody. And frankly, it's not a great sign sometimes when we say these lines as well. But one of the things is it's an ability for us to also step back and say, look, when I was in a fintech company about 3 or 4 years ago, we used to talk about B2C or B2B. Today, a big thing that we're talking about is B2B2C, which is a new kind of model and way of working. And we don't know how we can measure it. And investors are coming to us and saying, you're either B2B or B2C. How are you putting all this together? And we're like, yeah, but that's part of our business model. And this is how we measure it. And this is how we keep track of it. And this is how we deliver value with it. And I think that was a really useful conversation to have with the investors. So I think the toolkit breaks it down, gives it structure, guides us, facilitates, gives everybody a critical element. So I hope that helps give a perspective.
Thank you so much, Leon. I think it's very interesting as what you mentioned as well. I mean, I think all are very great points. I think given the timeline, I'll quickly move to Andy as well, based on the few questions that came from the audience as well. It's a very interesting aspect, because when we work with the high growth enterprises, as you are working with Andy as of now, we are talking a lot about how we can support as the support organizations, but what is the role of high growth enterprises in terms of supporting budding entrepreneurs, social enterprises, in terms of being investor ready, because they have gone through that experience and they have potential. So what are some of your thoughts in that aspect? Over to you, Andy, for a quick response.
Yes, I think that's very, very true. I mean, the world in particular, the world that we're talking about is about connections. Oh, can you hear? Hold on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Continue, Andy. Yes, we hear you. We can hear you. Yes, Andy, we can hear you. You can continue. Yes, we will hear you.
Can you? Yeah. So I was just saying, it's about peer-to-peer connections, and those peer-to-peer connections can come on a practical level. So it can be people involving other entrepreneurs in supply chains. It can be meeting other people in like alumni sessions and in similar industries. But I think the other thing that is very important is also emotional support. So, you know, it's a very, very lonely journey for a lot of founders and a lot of entrepreneurs. And, you know, to help, you know, almost metaphorically put their arm round and support up and coming social entrepreneurs is something that we see happening a lot, and it's something that people are very, very open to. And actually, there's no better advice that comes from someone who's just done this. So it's absolutely key, both on a sort of practical and an emotional level.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andy. I think definitely, emotional and support in terms of practical support, and this is very important. And as you mentioned, Leon, this toolkit can also act as an emotional and practical support for investors community in terms of supporting the investment readiness of the social enterprise as well. So really, really unfortunate that we are sort of running out of the time as well, and the next sessions are starting up. But I'm really, really humbled to have Jesse, Leon, and Andy today with really sharing amazing thoughts as their own practical experiences from an entrepreneur perspective, from an investor perspective, as an intermediate perspective, how they are utilizing social enterprise development toolkits for investment readiness, and some tips for all of you here in terms of how you can actually address this framework. And the most important ideas are really having that conversations between investees and investors, and also really thinking about how we can utilize existing networks to explore various new investment dialogues, because that was a key challenge that you guys are all highlighted. So with that, I invite you all to have a look at the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit at the ABPN page, which is developed fantastically, and a lot of cases are being there as well. Also provide feedback to our deal share platform and the network as well. There are amazing discussions that will have during this process of the next four days as well. So with that, I will hand over to Natasha. But thank you so much for participating here. We heard that we have almost 700 plus participants coming for this webinar. I think that shows the importance from investee and investor network on this dialogue, and hope that we can continue this discussion moving forward. So thank you so much, and over to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Savi, and all the speakers for that very engaging session and for sharing your insights on the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit. As Savi mentioned, we're very happy to report that we had over 700 participants for this webinar, and we're now coming to the end of the session, but this session is made possible with the kind support of our lead partners, Chandler Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Yidan Price Foundation, and our impact partner, Credit Suisse. To continue chatting with the speakers and fellow delegates, please make full use of the AVPN connector. We also invite you to visit the AVPN Hub and explore some of the thematic platforms there, such as the Social Enterprise Development Toolkit, our first step towards developing a common language framework between investors and social enterprises. Do share your highlights of the session on social media, and remember to tag us using the hashtag AVPN2020. Up next, the session Nourishing Asia, Scaling Impact at the Intersection will be starting at 3 p.m. Singapore time. Before we officially close the session, we invite all of you to participate in a quick final poll. And thank you again for joining the session, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.